Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to look at the year 2025 on a personal level. We're going to look at this from the context of your rising or sun signs to see how this year is going to play out for you personally. So we're going to go through the major transits for the year to decipher the most important factors for you. So we're going to look at Pluto in Aquarius, which has just permanently moved in November, and look at how that's going to play into the fact that Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn are all changing signs this year. So they're going to be in different houses in your chart than they have been for ages. And then we also will look at Jupiter and its ingress into Cancer to look at where that benefit and luck, goodwill is coming through for you next year. And we will also look at this big epic Mars retrograde process that we have just started going through and will be playing out for the whole first half of the year. And then we will look at the nodal axis and its sign change into Pisces and Virgo to see how the eclipses are likely to play out for you, with eclipses in Pisces, Virgo, and Aries within the context of your own personal chart. So this should play out. This should work perfectly for your rising sign. It could probably also hold for your sun sign as well, but also for a detailed description of what to expect in the coming year, do feel free to book a personal reading. What I do is I look at your natal chart, I go deeply into all of that, but then I use a lot of different timing techniques to see which eclipses are most likely to play out in a very poignant way for people. Whether or not their zodiacal releasing indicates that certain alignments are likely to play out and manifest in a specific way or not, and all of the transits to your own personal planets and so forth. So to really dig into this, I definitely recommend a personal reading, but this should hold really perfectly for your rising sign, and it will probably also apply for your sun sign as well. Additionally, for a mundane astrology general overview of the coming year, politically, historically, socially, I just published last week a really epically long video about that. So if you have the time and you are interested in how this year is also likely to play out on the world stage, I recommend checking that out too. And other than that, if you are new here, do please consider subscribing for future videos. I do topics like this, so the mundane astrology on the one hand, and then I tend to look at the exact same alignment or time frames from a personal standpoint and take it through all of the signs. So if that's something that is of interest to you, then do please feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you here for future videos. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I would greatly appreciate that. It helps the video to spread around. It helps the channel to grow. So I am deeply, deeply grateful for all of that. And without any further ado, let's get into your reading. For Taurus, we have Pluto is now in your 10th house of career, public standing, your reputation, your presence, your life out in the world, what you're known for. We then also have Saturn and Neptune moving into your 12th house in the coming year, and Uranus moving into your second house in the coming year. Now, these three will retrograde back into their old positions in your 11th house and your first house for the last few months of the year. And they will move permanently into these signs and these houses of yours about a quarter of the way into 2026 as well. So we will see that come back around again, but we're getting a preview of this. And because these changes are so big and they're happening kind of simultaneously, it's going to be very apparent, and it's going to be very helpful then to also pay attention to what these changes are introducing to you in this year so that you are more clear on what you're dealing with for a few years to come. So we are going to have Pluto in this 10th house of yours for about 20 years till 2043, 44. We are going to have Neptune in your 12th until 2039, and Uranus in your second house until about 2033. But again, there's going to be about 6 months later this year and into the following where these will scooch backward. Now, Saturn will be in your 12th house for about 3 years. So that is also something to keep in mind. And these are going to be close for the whole time that they go retrograde as well. So, with all of that said, Pluto now in your 10th house. It moved in permanently in November of 24. It was going back and forth over this cusp between your 9th and your 10th houses in the previous approximately year and a half, but it's now here permanently. So this is a very interesting influence within the context of your career. It can have you coming across as a more formidable, more powerful person within the context of your work. This can certainly bring promotions and increase when it comes to Pluto, but it plays out both ways. So it can increase your influence and your power within a working or a public sphere area of your life, but it can also then have that area of your life or people in that area of your life, say a boss or a client or another community member, also seem to have increased influence and power over you too. And Pluto can also bring up some fears. So these are different aspects that you'll be contending with over the coming 20 years, but I do definitely want to dispel a little bit of the fear that's around Pluto, because the way that it actively acts in our life is not as a destructive force. It will pull away things that aren't working anymore for us, and that's where the fear comes in. But if something wasn't working, then it's actually doing us a favor by tearing that down to an extent. So that is something to keep in mind with Pluto here, is that if things should wind up falling away, it's a reorientation for you in order to feel like you have more control over this area of your life, whereas in the previous situation, maybe you had less, in fact. Now, also, with Saturn and Neptune, these are interesting influences because Saturn can be very reserved. It can be very serious and stoic, very no nonsense, and even a bit miserly when it comes to energy and benefit. You can certainly benefit, though, from Saturn if you're willing to put the effort into wherever it is indicating that you should. And with Neptune, this is playing out as a sort of idealism or a romanticization within the context of the 12th house. Now, Neptune can also it can introduce some confusion or even delusions, or minor fears can arise with Neptune as well. But it can also bring a level of influence too. And so with these two working together, they are of an overall very different orientation in terms of their archetypes. However, they do overlap in certain areas, and so we do want to focus in on those areas. One of them is sacrifice for the greater good with Saturn and Neptune, but another is a sense of wisdom, a sense of knowledge, collected knowledge that is practical and applicable because it comes from experience. So that is an area that we'll want to focus in on in order to utilize this transit the best that we possibly can so that it's not just acting out. Now, this is in your 12th house. The 12th house is not the easiest for us to access. What it represents is the world beyond the veil to a great extent. So our subconscious, our patterning, our psychological nature, our emotional nature, our spirituality, but then also our intuition and matters like this. And so it's not the easiest area for us to actively engage with a transit. However, it is working up that psychological material. And the more effort, again, with Saturn that you're able to put into that, the more benefit you're likely to get from this transit. So actively working through emotional blockages or psychological patterning that seems conditioned and seems like something that you don't put a lot of thought into, but just kind of plays out in the background of your mind. Playing into that, or rather playing with that, like looking at that, and additionally also considering how that sometimes holds you back to do certain things. I think it's going to be one of the best ways to utilize Saturn and Neptune in the 12th house here as well. Now, you also have Uranus, which is a planet of disruption and surprise, shocks, changes, major overhauls, liberation, but also then potential chaos even with Uranus as well. That's moving into your second house. This isn't the most comfortable because of the fact that our second house, ideally, now for you it's in Gemini, so this might not be the biggest deal for you. It may be that you get your security from your own self with your heavy Taurus in your own chart, but the second house has to do with that security. It has to do with that on a resource material level. It has to do with that in terms of us feeling like we can kind of relax and we don't have to stress about any sort of survival questions. And with Uranus moving in there, that can bring up those concerns. Now, Uranus is not just a negative influence. This can actually at times bring in money that you weren't expecting, but it can also take things away along those lines. So I would always be saving for a rainy day in the coming years. Just making that a habit would be very beneficial just in case there are any hiccups, any big expenses that wind up coming up that you weren't expecting. And yeah, just any sort of financial fluctuations that you weren't expecting. When you're able to utilize the upswing on that to stow some stuff away so that if you get a downswing on that, then you have something to back you up. I think that's the best way to work with that transit and to work with the fact that this is an area of your life in which it would be really best for you to be very flexible in the coming years so that you're not butting heads with this Uranus transit here. This isn't going to be an area where you're able to just have a lot of control over it. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that the more you try to control those resources and so forth and make sure, no, this is always going to be coming in terms of income or whatnot, the more it's likely to slip through your fingers a bit. So yeah, just like setting yourself up in those really good ways, I think is going to be the best way to utilize that. Now, these are all playing together, and with the Uranus in your second and Pluto in your 10th, this could indicate a career change because we have a financial change and we also have a transformation of your career. So you could find that you are switching jobs. And again, this doesn't have to be a negative thing. This could be you putting yourself out there for a more lucrative position, maybe with more authority, and you receiving it, and therefore you get a pay boost. You know, these changes aren't always for the negative as well. So you may feel a bit up in the air around these things just because we're dealing with these very new transits in the coming year. This is an energy that you've worked with before. So it could feel like, ooh, what am I doing here? But this is likely to become more and more normal and more comfortable for you to work within as a context. So you could have definite improvements, more clients, more reach, even promotion with Pluto in the 10th there, but still somehow feel a little bit up in the air. So, for instance, if you're going independent, that can be another indication of these two things, of having control over yourself when it comes to your career, and then gaining independence, financial liberation with Uranus in your second house, where it's like, I don't want for my money to come from a company paying me. I want it to come from my work and my brand. um, that could also be something that you would be actively kind of reaching for here. And yeah, you could absolutely pick up quite a few clients in a surprising amount of time there. Now, in terms of disruptions that arise out of nowhere, that is the Saturn and Neptune in your 12th. That's the 12th house, is that kind of out of nowhere kind of place where things are going on and we're kind of unaware of them. We don't know that they're happening. So again, little signs and things like that. I would not be ignoring your intuition when you have Neptune in the 12th. That's one area where that's going to be an increased uh, talent and gift of yours. So I would really feel into that. Go with your instincts, go with your gut on things. And if something feels off, I wouldn't ignore it. I would look into it a little bit more, look for the tangible evidence, look for the Saturn in whatever the mess is, and see if you can get a bit of a clue on that, so that you're just caught less off guard by little disruptions. Saturn is considered a malefic planet, so it can bring challenges. And so we just want to be kind of very aware of the fact that can slip through in weird little ways when it's in the 12th house with Neptune there. And yeah, like I was alluding to, the need to feel more independent with Pluto in your 10th and Uranus in your second here as well. So that would be something I would encourage. I wouldn't just go whole hog if you're not ready for that. But as long as you have your ducks in a row and you're planning for it, I would try and go independent around this time. That's what the planets are encouraging you to do. And yeah, we can also have with Saturn and Neptune the reevaluation and the greater effort that's invested into developing your spirituality, developing those gifts, healing gifts in the 12th house. And again, even like reevaluating and putting effort into your own subconscious, your own patterning, your own conditioning, your expectations of life, and things like this as well. Now, with Saturn and Neptune, but especially Saturn, so for the coming approximately years, starting this upcoming year, with that in the 12th, these are some major overlying overlapping, that's the word that I'm looking for, sorry. Some major overlapping kind of archetypal characterizations that we're dealing with here. With Saturn, that can make you feel a little bit lonely and a little bit isolated, and like you have to focus only on these serious things. You're not able to have a lot of fun. And with Saturn moving into the 12th is also a place of isolation. It's also a place of where we are just with ourselves and our thoughts. So you could certainly feel isolated, even cut off from a part of yourself in the coming years. But again, I wouldn't worry about that. That's something that the planets are asking for you to engage in throughout this period of time. So if you start to find that you are not around as many people anymore, I wouldn't just interpret that as that there's something wrong. I think that that's something that's kind of requested here for you in this coming time, in order for you to develop again around your conditioning, around your own patterning, and learning to let go with Saturn and Neptune here, especially if the things that are outside of your control, you know, embracing with Uranus also in the second, the fact that the way that ancient astrologers looked at the second house and the 12th house was that they were hard for us to personally exercise control over or to fully understand what's going on in them because they're adjacent and they're a little bit difficult for the ascending place or the sun, so to say, to see. So there are areas where you're not going to be as in control as maybe you would like to, and you're being asked to embrace that with these transits here in the coming years. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Now, let's look at Jupiter and Mars and how these are playing out within your chart. Mars is going through a long retrograde cycle. Mars only goes retrograde about every 2 years. And when it does, it is a whole epic ordeal, a big old drama that it creates in the sky for about 8+ months. It's just a very epic experience for us. So since we're experiencing that in this coming year, it's going to be important to look at. So that will mostly be playing out in Cancer, which aligns with your third house. So for the first half of the year, oh, I actually have this a little bit wrong. So we're going to go from memory. Ignore this. During the first half of the year, you're likely to encounter difficulties or challenges within your locality, within your community, possibly arguments with siblings or drama with people around you. You could even wind up having, I would be careful about potential like car accidents. Really pay attention to your driving as much as you can. And if you are schooling or communication is a major part of your life in terms of your work, or if you're involved with groups and communication is really important, one, I would make sure that those things are going through. When we have a big old epic Mars retrograde in that third house, I wouldn't be surprised if some messages get lost in the ether. So I would double check on that. But you could also run across communication that is more conflictual in its tone than you would like. And I would try and take a step back if that occurs and ask yourself, did I also just communicate a little bit more conflictually than I was intending? Because that can be something that can easily happen when you have Mars in your third house, is you intend to come across as fine and neutral and good, and you can come across as much more domineering or insistent upon your way. So I would just kind of keep that in mind. That is the first half of the year till about May. Now, what's nice about this coming year is that we have Jupiter on the heels of that Mars, which is to say that this whole mess of a retrograde problem that we're dealing with here with Mars, which tends to bring, conflict and challenges. In retrograde, it can bring about some pretty epic delays and problems like that. You may even find that your commute gets a lot more annoying in the first half of the year with Mars there as well. But Mars just brings that kind of challenge, and it can require a great deal more effort on our part to keep things even keeled when it's transiting a certain area of our chart. So with that in the third house, that is why those issues of the third house are arising. But then on the heels of that, we have Jupiter coming into your third house. So it's cleaning that up a lot, which is just so nice. So what we're likely then to see in the second half of the year, as around the second week of June, Jupiter will be moving into Cancer, into your third house. From that point forward, we're likely to see, in fact, an improvement of the neighborhood, your connection with community, a great deal more, even just surprising beneficence or goodwill or kindness from neighbors, from people around you. Your commute is likely to feel less frustrating. Maybe you found a different route if there was a problem that arose when Mars was in that house. This is also likely to increase the likelihood of travel for you, even potentially a move. If you are moving, I would aim more like later in the year to try and get Mars not only out of the third house, but then out of the fourth as well. And we'll talk about that in the fourth house in a moment. But so if you are moving, it can help with that as well. It can help it to just go a lot more smoothly than you're expecting. Major increase in communications and also, again, the kindness of the communication when we have Jupiter in the third house, feeling more connected to those around you and feeling just a sense of camaraderie or goodwill between yourself and those around you. Now, also, if you've been wanting to learn a language, with Jupiter in your third house, that is wonderful. Anything really that you want to go to school for, or that you want to study, or even just read up on in your own time, Jupiter's going to help you to focus and to take in that material a lot more smoothly. Again, it's like things tend to just go better than expected when within the context of the area of our life that Jupiter is touching, and it'll be touching this third house for you in the coming year. So yeah, receiving kindness, even support from your kin, your uh, siblings and extended family, and then also from your community, from neighbors as well. So also, if you need something, you're very likely to get yeses when we have Jupiter in the third house there from neighbors and kin. Now, once Mars finally moves on from Cancer, and it spends about another couple of months in Leo. And that will be playing out within the context of your fourth house of home, family, property, and roots. So this could take arguments with siblings into arguments with other members of your family. I would really, for the whole year, just avoid any sort of family drama that could be arising. If people are trying to get you to pick sides, I would just roll that ball as far, into the future as possible before you have to deal with it, to see if it'll resolve on its own before you do, because it's just likely to cause a lot of headaches when we have Mars in this area of our family. Now, again, you may also feel a major urge to move pretty much throughout the entire year. And that could come with a lot of hiccups when we have Mars involved in these houses. So, again, if you're going to move, I would aim for mid of the summer, really like late summer onward, so that we get Mars totally out of this area that has to do with your living situation. Otherwise, there's just likely to be little annoying problems. It's not the end of the world, but it's just irritating usually when we have problems with Mars. And yeah, there could even be a desire to break with tradition, like a family tradition that could even then snowball into some sort of weird trauma within your family as well. So I would just keep an eye on that and try and make sure that those things don't snowball. Now, in terms of the eclipses that are coming up for us, they're about to change signs in this year. And we have pretty much everything changing this year. So this nodal axis here, the north node and the south node, these are the areas in which we have the sun goes toward the southern hemisphere and toward the northern hemisphere throughout the context of the year, right? Now, we also then have the moon goes toward the northern hemisphere and toward the southern hemisphere throughout the month as well. It is where those two come into alignment and into an intersection that is the nodes on both sides. So we have then eclipses, because then we have the earth and the moon and the sun in alignment. As we have this nodal axis switching signs, this always moves what we consider to be backward zodiacally, which is to say it moves clockwise. The planets move counterclockwise. That's the natural motion. Even the stars just ever so slowly move counterclockwise throughout the sky. So these move in retrograde all the time. So they've just come from Aries into Aries and Libra into Pisces and Virgo. So we're getting new types of eclipses, but I do want to point out that in the springtime, we will get one more solar eclipse at about 9 degrees of Aries. So we have one mismatched eclipse because of the fact that this nodal axis is still in these late degrees. So in the summer, or not in the summer, sorry, in the spring solar eclipse, this is going to be in Aries, which will play out in your 12th house. So it's going to bring up more of that need to release in order to mature and develop, recognizing those patterns again, bringing that into sharp relief as something that you can then develop further as we have Saturn and Neptune move into this house. And it's funny because we have these two crossing each other, and then it's like, the things that Saturn and Neptune were dealing with in Pisces, now the North Node is able to process that. The things that the North Node was processing in Aries, now Saturn and Neptune get to process those things. So this is a very nice and interesting interplay that we're experiencing in 2024 and then in really 2023 as well and into 2027. So additionally, we can have spiritual and subconscious breakthroughs with that springtime solar eclipse that'll take place on March 29th. Otherwise, what we're dealing with does fall into alignment with the nodal axis. So we're dealing with Pisces and Virgo here. We're dealing with your 11th house and your 6th and your 5th house here. So your 11th house has to do with your hopes, your dreams, your friends, your allies, the groups that you're involved with, your colleagues, your social network, so to say, in terms of your career and your public standing. It's the things that support your career. It's the resources, so to say, of your public life, the public sphere life, those relationships that are out there that don't have to do with family, but are still friendly and helpful to you. So you're going to have a lot of eclipses along those lines coming up. And so you could definitely see with the North Node coming in here and signifying an increase along these lines. Eclipses are not always just straightforward, positive, lovely. I wish that they were, because I have one on my birthday this year. But they can be a little bit shocking, but they are developments that are very necessary for us. So you could find that you have support in your career that is kind of surprising, that arises, and you could then even have some friends that are falling out of your life if they and their attitudes towards life are no longer in alignment with your own personal growth, especially when it comes to career matters or your public standing as well. Now, hopes and dreams can also arise around this upcoming year and a half, 2 years. So new things that you want to do that maybe you haven't realized that are actually pretty important to you up until this point. And this may also then, on the flip side of that, require for you to back burner things that you have outgrown in terms of hopes and dreams. Additionally, you're likely to experience some appreciation of your creative efforts, whether that be out in the world or just in terms of your own personal enjoyment of that creativity and that engagement with expressive outlets like that. Additionally, with the South Node, which is the things that we need to release in order to grow, develop further, but it can also be things that we over rely on. With that playing out in Virgo in your 5th house, you could be very perfectionistic when it comes to your creative efforts. You could feel like you want things just so if you engage in any sort of artistic medium or a hobby or something like this. And so you're being asked to release some of those inhibitions, some of that perfectionism, with regard to your own creativity around this time as well. So that'll be something that we'll start to see coming up in 2025, and then that's going to continue through for a couple of years as well. And if you want to see if some of these eclipses are aligning with personal planets as well, that is something that I look into in personal readings too. So if you are interested, I can definitely do that for you. But otherwise, I think that is pretty much what I have for you for 2025. So, with all of that said, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And again, if you want to go into this in more detail, do feel free to book a personal reading. I would love to look into how all of these transits are playing out in your own individual chart. And again, if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate that. And feel free to subscribe for future videos. I would love to have you here. And yeah, other than all of that, I again hope you have an absolutely beautiful year, and I will talk to you all soon. Be good. Bye.